My name is Wayne. I've had a career in software development specifically and various other technologies where I've been fortunate enough to work with really good teams initially and then start managing those teams, some of them as large as 40 individuals, and most recently one that was around 20 individuals. I was fortunate in the last one. I got to build a team. I was asked by my team members and a lot of other people to try and create videos on team leadership. I was viewed as an effective team leader, and I've developed many methods and skills in terms of leading development teams. Let me just say I'm not an HR practitioner. I never studied anything relating to soft skills at university. I was just fortunate enough to have very good leadership mentors in my life, and a lot of this and a lot of the thought processes I've developed myself. So certainly some of the ways that I depict this come from between my own ears, and so be it. If it doesn't make sense to you, I'm terribly sorry. Hopefully I can get it to make sense to you. So what is an effective team? That's what this video is about. I'm probably going to be making a series of videos around development team actualization. What are the preconditions for building a proper team is what I'm going to deal with in this video, as well as the actualization and why. And then I'm going to talk to how you build team cohesion and the reasons mostly for why team cohesion is so important. I'm a firm believer that we need to deal with cognitive teams. A cognitive team, especially in the development or the technical space, and certainly more specifically development teams, are teams that self-regulate. So, for those of you that are leading teams, you have to realize teams consist out of individuals. Each individual has different needs, and each individual, you must assume, at all times has got a dynamic situation. People get sick. People's family members get sick. People have a dynamic situation. Be aware of this. Be brave about dealing with them. Put yourself out there. Don't have any fear. These are not things to be scared of, and just showing a willingness to deal with individual soft issues is really, really important. And remember, in this case, the meek shall not inherit the earth, the meek shall inherit the dirt. If you do not deal with these things, you cannot build trust and respect. Be aware, be brave, and if you do that, you will build the trust and respect of your team members. Further to dealing with team individuals, let's look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Whether or not you believe in that is almost immaterial. I think some of the concepts are much more important behind this. Right? I happen to be a believer in satisfying these hierarchies of needs. So what Maslow said is that every individual has got a hierarchy of needs. The first hierarchy of needs is biological and physiological needs. You need to have food. You need to be able to have a roof over your head. You need to, in terms of the individuals within your team, them to be earning enough money to be able to take care of the biological and the physical needs. Then have safety needs. You need to know that the safety of your people is of paramount importance. This is particularly pertinent to the COVID-19 situation right now. We moved teams early off-site so that we could deal with their safety. We did not need to have the sick people. We did not need to create a sick team. Sometimes safety needs mean that people who are vulnerable need to not work alone in a specific building right after a specific hour, and you need to be very cognizant of safety needs. Then we've got an interesting one, which is belongingness and love needs. Everybody needs to feel that they belong somewhere, that they're loved or respected somewhere. It's called belongingness and love. I want to change it slightly, right? Because in a team concept, this means belonging to the team, being respected by the team. Once you've dealt with that, you need to have esteem needs. every member of a technical team, and especially a technical development team, is people need to be seen for what they bring to the team. People need to be viewed as important in their disciplines within a team, and these are all technical. Once you get there, people also need to have self-actualization. In other words, they need to feel that they can live their dreams, be their dreams within the team, right, as individuals. And remember, we're dealing with individuals here. And at the top, we've got that little red triangle right at the top here, and that now is what I'm going to be focusing on, is what does that mean in the concept of a team. It's also very, very important that you realize that you cannot have safety needs if you do not have biological needs, and you cannot have belonging if you don't have safety. You cannot have esteem if you don't feel that you belong. So it's very, very important to realize that these needs depend on one another and that they build up to the peak there, which, as I said, is where the focus of this video is going to be. Let's assume we've put them all together, right? And we're now starting to build the team. It is no longer about each individual's specific function within the team. It is now, how do they act together? How does this team actualize itself? Okay. Well, the first step, and I like to depict it this way as a growing triangle on the top there, is we start building the knowledge of what makes up a team. And then once we've done that, we can start learning, mentorships. We can start enhancing the knowledge skill within the team. The team now starts, individual members of the team now start depending on other members in the team for advancing their own careers, advancing their own and their own life stories. And eventually we have a situation where the team is actualized, we've built trust, there's honesty, and the most important thing starts happening at the top layer of building a team. You start getting to self-regulation. If we're only at that green level where we have belongingness, so everybody belongs in the team, but there's no team cohesion. It's not a cognitive team yet. We haven't built the team into action. We are not dealing with the soft issues around team. We get delivery, but it's usually individualistic. So everyone does his own thing. Hopefully you get it together. I can tell horror stories about a big banking institution in South Africa where I did an audit. There was no team efficacy over there, and the stats were shocking. One in about 7,500 lines of code was actually delivered into a live environment. And that becomes very, very expensive and very debilitating. Once we start building the knowledge around what a team means, around what it means for each individual in the team to interact with other teams and live off their knowledge, it becomes a lot more real. And the main reason why this becomes real is because you start having cross-discipline understanding and you have innovation across disciplines within a team. So, for example, the DevOps guy says, these guys are coding according to the way I'm going to deploy. And now all of a sudden there's a mutual understanding between those base disciplines, if you want to call it that, in terms of where you'll be going. Once you have learning and mentorship starting to happen within the team, juniors start feeling that they are being grown. Seniors feel that they are effective, right, in making the team more cohesive in terms of what they're delivering. And that's a really funny thing over there, and I'm going to explain it to you. The big indicator of whether or not you are at that level is when people start saying, I don't know what I don't know until I know enough to know what I don't know. And once people start asking themselves that question, they start learning themselves, right? They become their own mentors in terms of the technology, and they can then easily progress to the next level. And once again, these three layers that I'm putting on top of the individual triangle, being the sort of blue-green triangle at the bottom, right, we now start getting it. Eventually, this team becomes a premium delivery. Right? Trust is built, actualization has realized, honesty, and most importantly, the team becomes self-regulating. Practical example, one team member starts failing within the team, and other team members then step in and assist that member, not help. I'm going to be talking in a future video about the difference between help and assist. assist that member in getting up the curve properly. I also want you to see, in terms of the curve of this reddish triangle in the top there, relating to the team efficacy, is it's not a linear relationship. As you build it, it actually becomes exponential in terms of how well the team is functioning and how effective the team is in delivering the correct stuff at the correct time. So why do we do this all? It's really, really important to understand that a proper cognitive development team is not there just because of their technical knowledge. But when they work together, there are definite, distinct, and measurable advantages to having a proper team. Probably the most important one of these is what is commonly termed code debt. And code debt closely relates to the total cost of ownership of a project and a delivery. What is code debt? It is added cost due to rework required. That's a broad definition. The code debt I want to deal with is what's called the explicit code debt. Explicit refers to the fact that this is code debt that need not have been incurred. Implicit means it was planned code debt, it was understood code debt. But the explicit code debt is probably the biggest impact that a cognitive team will have on total cost of ownership. What is it not? Code debt is not scope creep, and often people confuse these issues. Scope creep is scope creep. That simply means that your client or the eventual user of the piece of software you're trying to deliver has changed his mind. It's also not as a result of bad analysis. Although, as cognitive teams go up the cognitive team curve, they start becoming quite street smart and practical in terms of understanding when bad analysis has happened. It's also not planned debt. Sometimes you say, right, we're not going to build this specific part of our application to a level of X because Y is going to be enough for a delivery, and it's far more important for us to deliver in a cheaper way sooner than to have the ultimate delivery. What are the causes of code debt? Explicit code debt is created often by individual members of the team taking the low road. This is where a team that is self-correcting, right, comes into play. This could be because of a skills deficit, in which case the team will enhance the skills. So you're looking for other members in the team to enhance deficit skills. But if it's simple laziness and taking the low road, that we deal with in peer review processes, right, in terms of bad coding to a level that should not be coded to. It could also be poor planning. Whether or not you're using Kanban boards or Scrum technologies or whichever way you're trying to do your rapid incremental delivery, poor planning at a day-by-day level can often create code debt. This must just be guarded against. Very often, the horrible one that creeps in is budgeting constraints and deadline constraints. We must be very, very aware that these can often cause unnecessary code debt and impact the total cost of ownership enormously. And if you're the leader of the team, it is your job to quantify this and make whoever the decision makers are aware that you are now creating code debt simply because of budgeting constraints or deadline constraints. Peer review failures we've discussed, right? Very often a peer review failure can let code debt slip through. However, explicit code debt is created due to a lack of leadership. We must be aware of that. So, what does this have to do with the team? Well, it's actually quite simple. When teams are high up on the cognitive curve, it is very bad for team morale to see code debt appearing within a project. The more cognitive and the more together your team is, the more code debt will become an issue for them to deal with, and it can become quite debilitating and must be guarded against. Let's try and depict this a little bit graphically. Right? And I say again, remember, we're dealing with explicit code debt. If we have an actualized team and your team is somewhere on that red actualization curve, this triangle shows the level at which code debt can occur within the team. It's very high when you're at the individualistic coding level. Remember, that's a little green layer that's kind of underneath this lot. All right, and the amount of code debt in your environment can be quite high, and since it's related to total cost of ownership, this is kind of an unacceptable way. As you go higher up the curve, the level of code debt becomes more and more acceptable, and that's because your team is developing as a team and as a way that they check and balance each other. On a totally actualized team, your code debt will be quite low and quite mature. Now, where does acceptability lie, right, in terms of code debt? Well, this happens to be a little pet project of mine at the moment. I'm trying to find a less academic way of measuring code debt, right, without spending thousands of hours of management time on it, right? But I'm pretty sure that at some stage, as an applied mathematician with a bit of a history, right, in solving problems like this, I'm going to get to a point where we can actually figure out what the acceptable level of code debt is. The less code debt you have in your environment, the longer a project takes, and the less code debt you have in an environment, the more expensive it becomes. So finding that sweet spot is a specific bent of mine, let me say. Okay. Bottom line is, there's a very good financial reason for building a cognitive development team when it comes to understanding and, above all, minimizing explicit, in other words, unintended code debt. What are some of the tricks in terms of growing and maintaining a cognitive development team? Now, this is not theoretical. As I said, I'm not very au fait with the theory of soft issues, but what is this? This is the measuring of soft issues. Once you've determined how you measure soft issues, and this will be a subject of a future video of mine in this series, add them to the KPIs. Too often, key performance indicators are simply develop so many lines of code, very bad one by the way, or deliver this project in this time type key performance indicators. Add soft issues to the key performance indicators. How well are you mentoring? How open are you to suggestions? Things like that. And as I said, this will become a specific video and dealing with that level of detail. Doing this is difficult. Too many managerial folk shy away from it and try and focus entirely on the more technical aspects of a project. Soft issues are difficult. Once you've determined how to do this, employ the measurement of soft issues often. The more often you do it, right, the more self-regulation comes into your team. Re-engineer it from time to time. There's an old adage that says, people respect that which you inspect. If you're inspecting the soft issues within your team on an often basis, if you stomp on unsatisfactory or bad behavior, right, in terms of soft issues within your team, other people see it, other members of the team see it, and people become aware of it, and they respect the fact that you deal with soft issues. What is the measurement of soft issues not? It's not about the technical knowledge. It's not about the specific project you may or projects you may or may not be busy with at this point in time. Those measurements are givens. Those measurements are measurements that must come out of scrums, goodness of plan evaluation. Normal software development managerial issues must deal with your project delivery methods. And it must never, soft issues must never be measured as part of a disciplinary function within a team. This visually. Here we have our team. All the people at the bottom. Team is actualized. How does measuring team efficacy happen? First of all, as the team grows higher up the curve, the accuracy and ease with which you can measure soft issues becomes more trusted and becomes easier to deal with. Measuring is most important. If you're in a position where you need to sell the effort that you need to put into measuring team efficacy to seniors or other stakeholders, use financial arguments to do so. Let's look at skills retention. Skills retention is probably one of the most important parts of having an effective cognitive development team. Replacing people because of bad management or ineffective team efficacy is extremely expensive. Skills retention also deals with enhancing the skills of the individuals within your team. If the individuals within your team see that you have an active plan for skills deficit mitigation, whether it is hiring new people into the team or whether it is developing people within your team, doesn't matter. If the team sees that you are keenly aware of skill deficits and that you're trying to manage towards a perfect skill balance within the team's accomplishment matrix, it becomes very effective in terms of letting people understand that your team is well managed. What is skills retention? Effective hiring of skills is going to also be a specific video that I will do, but assuming that you've hired the correct level of staff for each subdiscipline within the team, it is the retention of effective staff, growing those staff or the members of the team, demonstrating that you have a skills deficit and mitigation plan, and it is being essentialist in terms of what you're doing. And it's allowing the members of the team to practice essentialism. Essentialism is something that I also want to do a very separate video on. Very, very good book written recently on staying essentialist and the success that can be attained within development teams on making sure that the members of the team and then the team overall is essentialist in nature. What is skills retention not? Be careful of creating pigeonholes for sensitive people. Be careful of creating positions for people because of their skill sets. In other words, you're now fitting positions to skill and not the other way around. Be careful of dealing with ineffectual staff and trying to putting them in pigeonholes. Bottom line is skills retention is not retaining all staff at all costs. To get anecdotal on this, in a previous team that I managed, I had an extremely good technologist who was just, how do I put it, who was just a nowhere person. Nobody in the team liked him. Nobody trusted him. He would do anything he could to elevate his own position within the team at the expense of others. And eventually I realized I need to get rid of this guy. And I need to get him off the team, because his impact on the team far outweighed his effectiveness as, and I said it earlier, a really, really good technical knowledge base. So, you sometimes need to get rid of these people. Just further anecdotal, I made sure that my competitor employed him because that's what my competitor deserved. If we once again try and depict this on the actualized team graphic that I put together for this, the rate or ease at which you can retain teams gets very high the further you are up the curve of developing a cognitive development team. This reduces effective staffing and skills deficit decisions and has a very, very high financial impact because you're not rehiring for specific skills due to bad team leadership and or management within the team. So what's next, right? I think I need to address specific topics in future videos. So it looks like there were 2, 4, 6 more videos to come in the series. One of them is measurements. How do we measure the effectiveness of a team? How do we measure how far we are up a team? How do we give that feedback to team members? I use a method that I first learned while serving in the military called buddy rating. Let's call it team rating. So the buddy rating had nothing to do with how effective you were as a soldier or an airman, but more about how effective you were at communication, how effective you were at being a team player. Then I've got some very, very specific things that I can do, right, to assist leaders who need to build trust. Right? I mentioned essentialism, very, very important team actualization technique. I then have something that I've developed myself over the years in technical environments called turf sessions. And I know this is a unique concept, but what it pertains to is that people are not allowed to protect turf. Right? Once they understand how to do something within the team, or they have mastered a specific technology, they need to hand that technology over to the team. And I do this via turf sessions. In my most recent team, I used to do that between 2 and 3:30 on a Friday afternoon, when project time allowed. Then, probably very, very important as a leader, must be very careful of not playing triangle games. I'll explain what I mean by that. And then I'll probably end this whole lot by a whole bunch of tips and tricks and anecdotal stories around utilizing things such as differences, social differences in terms of gender, race, within gender, race, and other proclivities within a team, and how to utilize them to actually strengthen the team, right, and not create division. Thank you all. I hope somebody somewhere finds some use for this, right, and go well.